Okay, today, wrestling fans, Hustler Rip Rogers is going to do Tales of the Territories. And what territory are we going to talk about today? I know. Let's look at Northwest Canada. Well, not. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to talk about Calgary. Stu Hart. That's right, Stu Hart. All the Harts. Owen Hart, Bret Hart, Harts. We're going to be talking about the Calgary territory. And when I went there to work in 1988. And the big thing about going to Calgary in 1988 is that their television program was on TSN.
I came down here to do a normal interview. I just make it in time. They come and say, Owen, get in there.
TSN was like the superstation, just like WTBS of USA. If you were on Stu Hart's TV, if you were on Canadian TV, if you were on Stampede Wrestling, listening to Ed Whalen, who was sort of like the Gordon Soley of Calgary, you knew that you were going to be seen in every town, in every city, in every hamlet, in every village, all the way from Vancouver to the west, all the way past the Maritimes on the east. So that means anything in between, like Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, you name it, Regina, you were going to be, everybody in TV land in Canada was going to see it. If you wanted to be a major TV star, you go get onto Stu Hart's TV in the year 1988, because that's when I was there in 1988, which means when in 1988 was the year I didn't even wrestle in the States, but by being on their superstation, by being on TSN, I got over big time. So then all of a sudden, I go in the middle of the summer after I leave Baba in Japan, and I go work for Emile Dupre, and I'm the heavyweight champion there because of my publicity with Stu Hart on Stampede Wrestling. But anyway, in Stampede Wrestling, whenever you would come in, you'd fly into Calgary. And Ross Hart, who was one of Stu's sons, and Ross was always a substitute. He would referee. He would work underneath. He would be a substitute school teacher in the Calgary teaching system there. And he was a guy that he was a nice guy. He was a straight guy. He was a hard worker. So he could be trusted. When I flew into the airport, he could be trusted to go down, pick me up at the Calgary airport, find me some place to eat, and then take me to the St. Regis Hotel. Anybody that come in to work the Calgary territory for Stu Hart, they would all stay at the inevitable St. Regis Hotel. Because when you went to the St. Regis Hotel, when you went to the left or went to the right or went back, they all had titty bars there. So that was a plus. Then we go about 5 minutes down the road, and we'd all train at BJ's Gym. That's right, BJ's Gym. And at BJ's Gym, when I was training there in 1988, there was young Teddy Hart swinging from the chandeliers there. And you know he was going to be like an Eddie Haskell, and he was going to get into trouble later on in life, because he was the Eddie Haskell of Calgary in 1988. And with him was one of his cousins, and that was Davey Boy Smith Jr. He was right there, and these guys are both pro wrestlers today, so they did what their daddies did, and they became big stars. So when we're downtown in Calgary, and you're staying at the St. Regis, you know there's going to be a lot of action there, because a lot of ladies of the evening, they would sort of hang out at the St. Regis Hotel. And being that I was one of the boys, I could be like a bodyguard for them, and I could make sure they all got their money. So how anybody made their money, that's what the hell. You know how it is. But anyway, it was exciting. And at the St. Regis Hotel, on the bathroom situations, ladies and gentlemen, no matter where you stayed at the St. Regis, you knew that on each floor there was one bathroom. So you have to take a pee or take a poop or do whatever you want to do. Sometimes you had to stand in line. So remember now, if you're ever going into Calgary and you want to see some monuments, you can always go to the St. Regis Hotel. But anyway, we were supposed to talk about wrestling in Calgary and Stu Hart, so let's get talking with it.
I can't believe it. It really happened. Johnny Smith, you're like my brother. You're my best friend.
Okay, so Calgary was founded by the legendary Stu Hart. And Stu Hart, one of the nicest guys I ever met in pro wrestling. And Stu Hart, one of the most imitated guys I've ever heard in pro wrestling. So no matter what wrestler it was, and you start going, hey, you bastard, get tonight's show, I need you to, that right there was Stu Hart. And I used to wake up all the time. Somebody would be called me in the middle of the night at the hotel. One of the boys would be imitating Stu Hart. Except when Jerry Morrow would do it, and he'd go, hey, and Jerry couldn't imitate him because Jerry could speak 9 languages, I think, but none of them was English. So anyway, back to the Calgary territory. Now in the Calgary territory, it was nothing like some hot fucking coffee. It was a winter territory, and you had to be used to driving in the snow, being in the snow, whatever. They would have things in Calgary. It'd be called the Chinook, which happened to us one time where we left and it was like 80 degrees. So all of a sudden we got shorts and t-shirts on. That night there's a blizzard. We're under 13 inches of snow. We're about 2 hours out of Calgary, and all of a sudden we have to get towed in, which it took till the next day to get in there. So you knew that when you're in Calgary, now the boys that were from Calgary, they knew no matter what the weather was, they always had 2 sets of clothes. They had their winter clothes with them, and they had the summer clothes with them. And me, I was a dumbass. I just had my summer clothes with me, so the guys were laughing and making fun of me. I remember we was out pushing the van out, and it was the heel van, so Jerry Morrow was driving. So we had all the heels. We had about 9 heels in the van, and when we finally got pulled out, we went over to eat. They had an omelet place. It said omelets $4, but all of a sudden they seen our van coming in. All of a sudden they changed it to omelets $10. So we was stuck, but we had to pay the $10. What the hell, right? Another day in the life of just being all the heels in the heel van. They'd have a baby-faced van and the heel van. So sort of like on the heels, there might be like Jerry Morrow be driving, and then Cuban Assassin, he was always in there. Kerry Brown, he'd be in the heel van. The manager, Abu Weasel, he would be in there. Usually Goldie Rogers, Johnny Smith, Mike Shaw, who he was there, and he'd been there about 9 years before he became Bastion Booger. Gary Albright, Bad News Brown, he had a special seat way in the back. And the very first day I walked in and I got in his seat and didn't know it. He says, "You're in my seat." I said, "Oh, excuse me, Bad News, let me get the hell out of there. It'll never happen again." He just laughed. He was over. Gamma Singh, Troublemaking, Jonathan Holiday, all the top, them are a lot of the heels that was always riding in the heel van. And the heel van, what it was famous for was Cuban Assassin. He had an abnormally large bladder. Not talking about the size, I'm talking about the Cuban would be in the van when the matches would be over, and he'd be drinking beer, and he might drink a case of beer. And all of a sudden he'd say, "Jerry, pull over." So he would pull over. Everybody would get out, and the Cuban Assassin he would hold that pee so much, and all of a sudden he'd piss over the van, and almost, sometimes all the time, but sometimes he didn't make it. But he'd have the super duper spray, and he'd control the, with his thumb, like he was doing the water hose, so it would spray east and west, or just like that. But he could pee over that thing. And that was one of the greatest, most exciting things I'd ever seen in my life. So that was the Cuban Assassin after drinking all those beers and the boys cheerleading him on. The thing about the heel van is, let's just say Stu's vans, they weren't like new, and they were always breaking down. So a lot of times we'd be hitchhiking somewhere, And a lot of the times, if when we were supposed to leave at 2 o'clock, the heels would get out of there at 3 because half the guys were late. But such is life. So the heels, they were the exciting guys, you know. Now in the baby faces in Stu Hart's territory, you had Brian Pillman. He was an up-and-comer. He just got finished playing Canadian football. He played the Cincinnati Bengals first, and then he played with the Canadian League. And then he was being trained, and he was sort of like a rookie. And he was tag partners with the booker, who was Bruce Hart. Now, another young guy who was there on the babyface side was the great Chris Benoit. Now, Chris was there, and he was the shyest, hardly ever said a word, was always eating healthy, doing squats, doing push-ups, and he was trained in Japan because Bad News liked him. He got his start over in Japan, training over there. Jason the Terrible was there under the mask. He did the Jason gimmick, and that was Carl Moffat. And he's about 6'5" guy, so he was huge. And then when I was over there, Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, they come in after they had their run in WWE. So they all come back to work Calgary, and Dynamite had been a veteran there and a star there in Calgary for a long time, and so it had Davey Boy. So they would be ribbing everybody, be farting in their face, or put a halcyon in your beard, and they'd shave your eyebrows, and or just somebody would accidentally take their clothes when you were in the ring, and they might cut off your pants and the sleeves of your shirts and stuff. But you know, what the hell? When you're in wrestling, right, you're there to have a good time and to laugh a bit. Some other veterans, great Leo Burke was there. Leo Burke was one of the famous Cormier brothers, where he was brothers with the Beast. He was brothers with Rudy Kay and Bobby Kay. So they were the famous guys from Nova Scotia. So there he was getting more TV time. So when he went home to work for Emile Dupre in the summer, he had been on TV the whole time and was projected. Now, Biff Wellington was there, Scotty McGee. Scotty McGee was there, and I really liked Scotty McGee. He was Jeff Port's son. He wrestled under a different name. I can't place it right now. But all these guys, they were the baby faces that rode in the babyface van. So you had a babyface van and you had a heel van, and you didn't know which one was going to get there. Sometime all the heels would get there. The baby faces would be an hour late, and sometimes it'd be vice versa, and the baby faces there, and the heels would be there late. So it was always a crapshoot. But the boys had a great time. You loved traveling with Stu and Stu Hart's because your trans was paid. So it wasn't like you was shelling out money for gas and stuff. That was part of the deal when you come in. Got a plane ticket in, got a plane ticket out, and Stu provided all your transportation. So all you had to do was basically show up. Every day was a Saturday. Every day was fun time. Every day you was wrestling. Every day you was just shooting the shit with your buddies. Every day your only thing you had to do was, if you wanted to work out, go ahead. If not, you could work out when you got there at the show. And you could always eat good. The boys were always ribbing, fucking with each other. There was rats galore. They had some of the greatest rats in Calgary. Now, the main towns of Calgary, you had Friday night. Every Friday night was Calgary. And every Saturday night was Edmonton. The other things, they would have spot shows. They might be in Vancouver. They might be in Regina. They might be in a town 100 miles away or whatever. But with Stu, you pretty much worked every day. And everybody there was on a guarantee. And when Stu had you on a guarantee, every week I was there, he always paid me at least $100 more than what I was guaranteed. And of all the promoters that I'd ever worked for, I never heard one fucking person say anything bad about Stu Hart. He was so loved. Stu Hart was just a sweetheart. But he'd get those marks in the basement, in the dungeon, at his house. And his house looked like the Addams family or the Munsters house. It was a big old, huge old house and everything. And Stu asked me if I wanted to come down the dungeon, but by then I was smart enough to say, no, Stu, I got stuff I got to do. But he'd try and grab you. But if Stu would grab you, and he had the big old fat, strong hands. Stu was a badass. Stu loved wrestling with you, and Stu loved his pro wrestling. But I never heard him raise his voice to anybody, yelling at anybody. Now me, I never heard myself being sane. I was always yelling at somebody. He had the finger on what you was supposed to be, and I was just the opposite.
I said, get ready, get ready, get ready. I got the dots on, I got the elbow ready, baby. We're gonna see it. Let's do it right now.